Hello, Brubs. We're back with The Making of a Vampire, Paracelsus, Rabbi Loew, Saint Germain, Dracula, by Alexander Şendrea. I believe I can probably finish this book tonight, since there's only 13 pages left. I believe I left off here. Once the horses changed, the diligence left the inn. All lights were blown out, and the silence and dark spread all over that place. Only the kerosene lamp was moving in the wind and threw its yellow-reddish light over the horses and the balcony. The Count retained 2 rooms at the very end of the balcony and on the second floor of that picturesque old-fashioned inn. Each room had a fireplace, and the groom lit a log fire in each one. The 2 travelers entered one after the other, their separated rooms, and waited. They didn't go to bed. Outside it was cold and began to snow over the town and hills and forest. The 2 travelers were waiting in their rooms, warming themselves in front of the fireplaces. When the clock of the church stroked 12 times in that magisterial silence, Saint Germain stood up and entered Dracula's room, took a chair and sat down at some distance in front of the fireplace. In that overwhelming silence, it was only one small noise. Coming from outside, the squeaking of the kerosene lamp as it was slowly blown to and fro by the wind. Dracula was concentrated on himself, invoking one of his she-vampires, whispering her name again and again. The inn was quite far from his castle, and he needed additional power to call her from that distance. Suddenly, a white, quivering smoke appeared in the room and slowly took the shape of Ilona. She was dressed in a diaphanous nightgown, which let the spectator notice all details of her young, voluptuous forms. Her appealing breasts were palpitating with desire as she approached Saint Germain, on whom her fiery reddish eyes were fixed with sensual greed. Saint Germain, who was waiting for months for that encounter, looked younger than ever. He raised from his chair and opened the arms, inviting Ilona to his chest. Smiling with pleasure and showing her sharp fangs, Ilona opened her arms too, and they both pressed one against the other in a strong, tight embrace. Ilona's fangs entered deep in his throat, and she sucked his blood with unrestrained gluttony. Then the grip loosened, and the 2 bodies apart. That can't be right. And the 2 bodies separated. Dracula stared at them intently. A peeper. Saint Germain was not weakened at all after the loss of his blood, and Ilona seemed unsatisfied. Her countenance expressed astonishment and suspicion. What kind of blood has he, master? I am still hungry. Dracula knew the reason, but said nothing. Saint Germain refused to give up. Why, darling, he said loudly. You are a wonderful woman. Your kiss is marvelous. Try again. Don't let you be thirsty. Help yourself once again. Ilona was suspicious. As a matter of fact, she had to hypnotize her victims in order to have them fall in her arms. If she had not the time to hypnotize them, they ran away frightened. This one, however, offered himself to her with a surprising eagerness. Moreover, he insisted for another kiss, a request which she knew from experience as unconceivable. She motioned to her master, but Dracula was busy with stirring the fire. She moved away, but felt on her nape the man's warm breath. He came very near of her, imploring her to kiss him again. Try, darling, try again. You cannot even imagine how dear your touch is for me. Help yourself once more. This was too much indeed for Iona. She became definitely distrustful, changed herself back into smoke, and disappeared. Saint Germain turned to Dracula in anger. You must fulfill your obligation, Dracula. Call her back and order her to kiss me again. She'll never kiss you again. She doesn't like you. Then call another girl. Call another girl at once. It's useless, Saint Germain. You grew old and your skin is hard and dry. The girls don't like you any longer. Don't be stupid. I'm not old. I'm ageless. Call another girl for me at once. As I fumble with this book. I tell you, it's useless. And he kept refusing, although he was himself intrigued by what he saw. In fact, he was quite willing to call another vampire and put her at work, but was afraid not to infringe upon his own laws, which forbade him to use his powers that way. He was not permitted to use his powers to change orders or curses. Ilona was a demon who worked on her own, of course, but a strange curiosity was pushing him. Dracula to call another vampire, invest her with additional power, and order her openly to change Saint Germain into a vampire. He knew, however, that he could be terribly punished if he yielded to that temptation. A vampire was allowed to tempt humans into wrong ways, but not to let himself or herself be tempted. Saint Germain, on his part, was very insisting, and Dracula eventually accepted. He sat down in his chair, concentrated on himself, and called several times another she-vampire, Marika. After a while, a white cloud of smoke of about the same size as the previous one came into the room and changed itself into Marika. The girl was an exciting brunette, as buxom as Iona, dressed in a pale yellow robe, which was tailored in such a manner as to stress her sex and secret charms. Her shiny, fluffy dark hair heaved up, and her naked breast shivered with excitement as she approached Saint Germain. She was smiling greedily, showing her white fangs. The man received her with open arms, pressing her very dearly against his chest. Although intrigued by that warm reception, Marika bit him deeply in his throat and sucked a lot of blood from his veins with full pleasure. But the result was the same as with Iona. Saint Germain felt no weakness after the loss of his blood, and Marika felt not at all satisfied after the bite. Dracula stared intently at them as they moved apart, and noticed how inefficient Marika's spell was on Saint Germain. Like Iona, Marika remained perplexed and became suspicious when Saint Germain asked her for another kiss. She turned to her master and begged of him to let her go back to the castle. The Count agreed reluctantly, and she left the room in haste. Let's check this out. Count Dracula in his carriage, driven by his bailiff. All right, then. Everything happened. Wait. This time, Dracula was not only intrigued, but also stirred up. Saint Germain, on the other hand, was pressing him more than ever to fetch another girl. Although pretending, as before, to decline Saint Germain's request, he secretly decided to help his partner. He eventually accepted to call the third she-vampire, Anna, but told Saint Germain to fight against her. Everything happened as before, except that this time Saint Germain pretended to be frightened when Anna first looked at him and feigned to flee from the room. When Anna made use of her hypnotic powers to stop him, he feigned, again to fight against her dominion. This challenged Anna to make use of all of her powers, and indeed her powers reached their climax when she parted unsatisfied from her would-be victim. The blood was still running down on her chin when Dracula, all precaution forgotten, ordered her furiously to bite again and deeper and suck every drop of blood out of that body. Anna executed the order as scrupulously as she could. The very moment she was enraptured with delight, Dracula made an unpardonable gesture. He bit her deeply in her neck with the irrational commitment to transfer her more powers. This made her greedier than ever, and she literally sucked every drop of blood from Saint Germain's veins. To make sure, Dracula bit her again, and she in turn bit Saint Germain again and again, and all three became deliriously united in a frenzy of thirst. Ilona. for blood and power. It was an unprecedented act of greed on the vampire's side, and of profound despair for the poor cursed man who got the feeling, even before the end of that madness, that he would not die. He went out of the delirium and remained unaffected by the vampire's spell. First he looked scornfully at Dracula, then the scorn of his gaze turned into deep dejection. Very tired and disappointed, he seized his hat and cape and slowly went out of the room. In the big silence of the night, Dracula heard his steps down the stairs. When he looked out in the courtyard, he saw an aging Saint Germain, figure 43. I don't even want to look. Stooping to pick up a stick from among the legs of the horses. He was no more the handsome Count of Saint Germain, or the aggressive bailiff of Count Dracula. The aging man left the courtyard, propping himself up with the stick, and disappeared in the cold and dark of the night. The road of the village was already covered with snow. The kerosene lamp was rocking to and fro in the light wind of the winter, and squeaked in its hook. Then Dracula felt a terrible pressure on his shoulders, an overwhelming pressure from above that almost crushed him down, and he knew the punishment for his irrational, crazy yield to temptation was going to strike at him. It was not long before the dawn. He grasped Anna's hand and hurried out of that room, out of the old-fashioned inn. They both covered the long distance to the castle in the twinkling of an eye and entered their tombs. Next day, the villagers learned of Count Dracula's arrival. The lights in the main tower of the castle were lit again after midnight. The wolves again came near the castle in large packs. However, the peasants waited in vain for the bailiff to come down to their village and hire servants. Nobody came out of the castle anymore. It looked like a world of evil fomenting from behind the battlements up there. One night, a young shepherd, what's it say, Illy, heard the cows moving noisily in the stable. When he entered there, he found the animals crowding in a corner. In another corner, he saw Marika, almost nude, figure 42. She was so beautiful and inviting that he remained simply bewildered, staring at her. He felt the hypnotic power of her glamorous eyes catching hold of him, and suddenly the rumors about Dracula and his vampires came to his mind. Before yielding to the unexpected temptation, he grabbed the silver cross he wore at his neck and ran out of the stable. He alerted his parents and the neighbors, and all went together to the stable to see the apparition. Marika was no more there, but the animals were still agitated, crowding in the same corner, some of them mooing with terror. Next morning, the peasant went to their priest and told him about the event. The priest called for a meeting of the whole village in the central plaza. The villagers came with their usual weapons, forks, scythes, and torches. The priest with holy water and a tall cross on which he wrote, "Lord, protect me from devil." They were very worried and anxious and decided to go together to the castle. They arrived there late in the afternoon. The priest said a prayer in front of the big porch and sprayed it with holy water. Instantly, the ugly howls of the wolves were clearly heard in the deep of the surrounding forest. A note of atrocious pain seemed to tremble in those howls, and a cold wind started blowing along the gray, tall walls of the castle, I assume. This really sucks doing this way. Oh no, there she is, naked. Marika trying to hypnotize young Illy. Of the castle, the villagers pushed the porch open, and they all hurried to the dungeons. There the man who spent a night in the castle showed them Dracula's tomb. They removed the slab and looked inside. At the yellow-reddish light of the torches, they saw the corpse of Count Dracula, laying face down on a pile of black earth. The body was completely dressed in the Count's black tie and tails. His hands were grasping the earth. His face was plunged deep in the earth. There was no sign of life in that body, no movement, no breath, however. He looked like sleeping in a weird position. One of the villagers, who was stronger than the others and obviously more courageous, took the pulse of the body. It was none, no beating of the arteries. The strong man of the group leaned over the corpse and placed a sharp stake on its back, the sharp point at the level of the heart. The priest began the prayer for the death, holding the cross up in the air over the tomb. Two peasants stroked the stake with their heavy hammers, and the stake pierced the chest and the heart, fixing the corpse to the earth forever. An obscene and short convulsion made with the lower part of the body, perhaps the vampire's last sexual activity, followed by a total rigidity, showed the success of the operation. The group then moved to the other tombs and removed the slabs. There they found the corpses of Iona, Marika, Anna, and other teenagers who disappeared mysteriously from the village. The peasants acted in the same way, assisted by the priests with the same success. They killed all the vampires. Then they went to the first floor and lit a big fire in the middle of the hall, using furniture, rugs, and other flammable things. After a short while, the castle was all in flames. They went home and came back after a few days. They demolished everything that remained after the arson. They smashed to pieces everything that could not be demolished. They took the stones and paved the road that crossed that valley. They turned into dust and burnt again the remaining debris, so deep their hate was. The following falls and winters and the rain and snow make that place smooth, and in a couple of years nothing remained from Count Dracula's castle but the legends. However, the travelers who crossed that country at the turn of the century noticed as a curiosity that the only paved road in those parts was a portion of a remote highway leading from Transylvania to Moldavia along the Bargal Pass. Then, an Italian reporter came to Transylvania half a century later to inquire into the heresies about Count Dracula, found an old cross, dilapidated by the time, laid on a tomb in a forgotten cemetery, bearing a still visible inscription, "Lord, protect me from devil." I assume he means the devil. Here's an aging Saint Germain leaving a Transylvanian inn as the wandering Jew. And that was a very curious book. What else is here? Illustrations, Aryan, Eastern, blah, blah, blah. Bizarro. I mean, that adds to the lore, I suppose. Not that anyone will take it as scholarly inclination. Anyway, that's all. Goodbye, bruv. Goodbye, bruv.